Alright. So, let's take a look at what's going on in this patch. Updated. Just read it. Whew. I know they had like a lot of mini reworks and reversions to like things they've done to champions in the past in this patch, so two of those are LeBlanc and Ari. I think those are the first things here. Yeah. Alright, so LeBlanc. They're basically reverting her into her old state was the idea. Where her Q now applies a mark, she hits something else with it, and it does a immense amount of single target damage. It's a click spell, she clicks on you, does a very strong amount of burst, in case somebody's unfamiliar with her old kit. And when most of her damage ends up in her Q, she's going to max W for the wave clear. And when most of her damage ends up in her WQ, her damage in lane ends up feeling really low counterplay, where if you're like a mid-range champion and she can get in range of you, she doesn't, without needing the chain, then she can do so much damage that she can threaten to kill you after the fact, or she can safely pressure you away so that she can go elsewhere with her relatively low cooldowns. Even on her ultimate, her ult's pretty low cooldown too. But this is what she's going to end up maxing. The cooldown doesn't scale down as hard as it used to, and it's a little slower, and there's actually a little bit of time from when you finish the dash that you're going to be able to react to LeBlanc. So this is a little healthier than the old state of Distortion. It's a little easier to trade back in lane. It's a little bit easier to use CC on her after she dashes forward. It'll be a little bit easier to punish her, a little bit easier to react to. Her chain, they're taking most of the damage back out of her chain, or out of the first part of her chain, so you have to stay next to the person to get the chunk of the damage. I'm pretty sure when she used to be played, this was 0.5, just like it was for the current one, but they're putting more of the damage into the latter half of it, meaning that if she wants her full combos damage, she needs to land her chain and be able to stand next to you for like the 2 seconds. I don't think it's 2 seconds, it's probably like a second and a half, for like the chain to latch. So that is a healthy change, putting more damage into the back end of it and encouraging her to be the aggressor and to be closer to people, so that they are punished for being that close, or for if she like dashes forward and immediately like tries to chain and is able to like stick with you for like the duration of the chain, then she's going to have extremely high burst. She'll probably would she still build? No, I think if she's maxing W, she'll probably go like a mana item first. I don't know if LeBlanc would still build Gunblade. I don't think she needs it. Her current kit is a little low on damage in exchange for like utility and like some of her damage being backloaded, and some of her utility through her ultimate, like the unique things that she can do. So I think instead she might build more toward like an actual mana root now and play more like a CDR mage. And when she plays like a CDR mage with her low cooldown ultimate, she's going to be able to chunk people out of lane really reliably, and she'll be able to in a lot of matchups, LeBlanc's going to feel really oppressive because she's going to go back to her old way of not really you don't get to interact with the way that she trades with you a lot of the time. You get to trade damage back on the back end, but if there's so much front-loaded damage, then you can't effectively trade anyway, because if you stay into the fight, then you lose from there. And especially if you you get hit by this chain, because the 0.7 ratio on the second part of the chain is extremely high. And they buffed the second part's damage, so this a lot of her damage is still in the second part of chain, but they rebuffed her Q and W. Overall, her damage seems fairly fucking high. Because RQW will do, I mean, what, 1.2 times the QRW, I mean, and then another 0.8 to 2.6 times AP ratio, plus a pretty meaty amount of base damage, not including the fact that she can get another full AP ratio out of her root. And then she'll have more damage put into her W. So it's going to be easier for her to clear too, especially post 6, because she can just like WR the wave, and then like 30 seconds later she's going to have her ult back up anyway. So she can do that on any wave that she needs to get priority of, or that she needs to like push in to like deny you something. So LeBlanc going back to her old way. She'll probably build a little different now because she doesn't need artificial damage, because she has more damage in her actual kit, rather than that's more reliable damage in her actual kit, and a lot more put into her W. Basically think about it this way. She didn't really lose damage on her E. Yeah, PoE's down for like 15 minutes. She didn't really lose meaningful damage on her Q. She lost 0.1 AP ratio. What she did lose was like her passive damage, but all that is put back into her W. So if you were in a situation where you didn't fight for 2 seconds with LeBlanc, then she's going to do way more damage than before. And if it gets to 2 seconds, then she's going to do similar damage to before, because more of her damage is like backloaded into this and put into Distortion. But it encourages her to use Distortion for the damage, as opposed to just the mobility like she's using it for at the moment. So probably scary in a lot of matchups. We'll see what they end up tuning with her. I don't know if like these numbers will be too strong or not. That's gonna be like really hard to tell. Some of the things that are good in mid right now, like she would really punish Taliyah. She reliably can punish Taliyah, especially if she has like this kind of like damage pattern. And like Taliyah can trade back some damage, but like that would hurt. And Taliyah is like a very super meta pick. Galio would be good into her because he can fight back against like her wave clear, and he can CC her if she wanted to go in. Who else is good? Azir, she historically actually can threaten Azir better than a lot of champions can, because if she has her R, then she can close the gap potentially twice. She can chase his E with it potentially, and then she can do like a meaningful amount of damage. But I think Azir probably still wins that matchup slightly because of the range discrepancy between the two. And then Ryze is relatively low range, so Ryze can actually probably be punished by LeBlanc in lane, and then it'd be really easy for LeBlanc to set up for like somebody else to come punish like a short range champion in mid lane. So let's go to Ahri. Ahri, if Ahri earns 2 spell hits against a champion, so if she lands 2 spells, then she gets the movement speed that her Q used to give her, basically. So she has to actually commit and land one of her skill shots or R. If she Rs you later game, then she'll get that movement speed anyway. So this basically means that when she RWs you, even if she doesn't land a combo, then she'll have much more damage doing it. So, not much more damage. She'll have more movement speed in between. What am I doing? Not damage. If Ahri earns 9 spell hits, max 3 per cast, she gets Essence Theft. So they're just moving the passive, the heal, literally to her Q. It literally just gets moved to the Q. They're switching the 2 and moving this Tide directly to her Q. But then the heal that you get will only proc off the Q, whereas right now, if you needed to, you could proc like the heal immediately off of W. But if you get the heal to trigger, the buff to trigger, then you can't trigger it until the Q comes back out. So you're going to get a little bit less cast off, but it was always best to use it on the Q anyway. So this isn't like a meaningful change. These are just like they're swapping the 2 around. So Foxfire costs 10 less mana. Not super meaningful, but okay. Delay for non-priority targeting. Firefox prioritizes any champion affected by Charm's damage am, and the target already most recently basic attacked. So she can walk up, auto attack you in W. So, I mean, that makes it a little bit more reliable, because actually that makes it a lot more reliable, because if you walk up in W right now as Ahri, then you basically, the damage just goes on, like creeps. But if it prioritizes a champion that you've auto-attacked recently, that means Ahri could be really threatening potentially into like mid-short range champions with Foxfire early, just by walking up and autoing them, and then she's going to be able to press W, and the damage is just going to go into them, guaranteed. So that's actually an interesting change. That actually could be meaningful into melee, even though it's not like a big change. It could be meaningful. And then Charm, they're lowering Charm's damage, and instead she gets a damage multiplier. So damage multipliers are always super dangerous, because I think when this was in the game before, it was a 20% global amplifier, but now it's Ahri's abilities deal 20% more damage, which is definitely healthier. But it lasts for a super long time too, 5 seconds afterward. So this means that if Ahri lands a charm on you, she could then potentially do something like W you twice and get all 3 of her R's off and kill you with that 20% damage amp, not necessarily needing to like land like her Q, or even have been able to follow up immediately after the charm or something like that, because you take the damage for a significant time after the charm ends. So, and this will also make her more potent against tanks, because it'll increase her Q damage by 20%, and it's 5 seconds of amp, so that could reasonably be 2 Ws on a tank and like a Q on a tank, and 20% more true damage is actually very significant, because Ahri actually can do pretty meaningful damage to tanks when she plays more like a mage. And sometimes she gets forced into that playstyle depending on their composition and how much they can punish her for when she tries to go in. So, taking some of the damage out of her charm. This is a pretty notable change, because they're lowering the base damage on her ultimate, but the ratio is going to go up. By the time that you get this, you're going to do a little bit less damage with it baseline. But later in the game, that will even out and then pass. Like at like 3 items, this is more damage than the current ultimate, and at 2 items, like rank 2, it'd be more damage than the current ultimate. But baseline, this lowers her all-in potential right at 6. Because right at 6, she's going to have lower base damage here. She has lower base damage on her charm when she's scaling that up in mid-game. And they're trying to lower her damage a little bit to compensate for the fact that if she lands charm, she now gets hugely rewarded. But she's not losing a ton of damage for it, and she'll scale back that damage through the Spirit Rush AP ratio buff. So across the board, and this 20% amp, this is important to realize too. This 20% amp is basically a 20% more multiplier on your other AP ratios. So this has a 0.75 ratio right now, but after the change, it's going to be 1.05. But if you have already landed a charm in the last 5 seconds, it's not 1.05, it's 1.25 something, right? So then you can think of it as it's going up by 66% in AP ratio. So this ability scales 66% better now if you like are comboing somebody than it did previously. And the other spells would scale 20% better. But this has like its own like thing that it's already getting better, and then those two are going to multiply off of each other. And her R is going to do a significant amount more damage as the game progresses. A significant amount. So she'll have a lot more pressure mid-game to kill people, and she'll have more kill threat in lane, especially if she lands her combo together. And this is interesting because this might make it her harass on shorter range champions a lot more reliable without necessarily having to fish for Qs, because this is low mana cost. Like, you can honestly use this pretty free. This outranges most champions that are that like their auto ranges, like basically every auto range, and then it'll like auto target. So if you just auto somebody and then W, I mean, even if they start to walk away, then they'll still eat this on the back end, guaranteed. So that's interesting. That's an interesting change. Relia's laning phase is pretty weak, so they're buffing her armor and her damage to minions so she can more reliably farm. No longer credits Aurelia for several minion kills each cast. That's interesting. And R. So her R has a lot of power in it. Like, a lot of the agency of her kit is in her ultimate, because it's super wide. You basically can't miss it. And it explodes out behind the person, and then it's super punishing if you walk through it. So they're reducing the damage on it pretty significantly. This is 75 damage early if you like had to walk through it after the fact, and later game that's 175, and the cooldown's being increased. So like, this has way too much power in it. So I agree with these changes. This is like what should be changed, because when she ults you, it's basically impossible to miss unless you use like a flash or a mobility skill. And then if you are forced into a situation where you have to get away from her, or you get have to hit the wall, then you get punished severely hard because you can't fight back for a second and a half. You're now severely slowed. You took an immense amount of damage from a rank 1 ult. 275 base is crazy. So this is a good change. This is healthy, because her ultimate is way too potent. And so if they want to buff her in slight other ways to like compensate for like lowering the power on her ultimate, I think those are healthy changes. I wish her E had more of a delay, so like it felt more counterplayable, because it's pretty damn free. But notes aside, like, that's just what they're doing. So I agree with the direction of these changes. These are good changes. Azir's range wave. Let's just look at this. Avoid punishment in tougher matchups while giving him more time to harass. Less wave clear. Okay, so he's losing 15%. Oh, that's actually quite a bit. Oh, all right. So his wave clear is a lot worse, really, because right now he does 40%, and that scales up to 70 at 6. But it's not gonna. You have to be level 11 to get that now. So he's gonna be missing. What's that? 40% of his wave clear that he has now. I mean, I guess he's just gonna use Q more often to clear the wave, but this hurts his wave clear the most really early levels, when he doesn't have many points in his Q, so his Q doesn't do as much damage. So really early levels, Azir's actually going to be pretty damn bad at pushing. Because right now, Azir's pretty okay at pushing. He can push back against a lot of people really early, because he drops a soldier, he can just stab the entire time. But if it's only doing 25% damage to the targets that aren't the main, and then it ends up to 50 at 6 as opposed to it used to be 40, 70, then he's losing a lot of wave clear from like 1 to 6. Once he gets to like 7, 9, his Q gets a pretty low cooldown, and the damage on it scales up, so I think he gets pretty his wave clear will be fine a little bit later, and once he gets like some AP. But these are notable nerfs to his early game clear. All right, so Braum has been like a contested pick all around the fucking world, and has been like super high priority for some teams. Armor growth. Cannot do shit when he's so tanky. That's funny. Armor growth. He goes down to 4, so he's going to lose a little bit of armor as the game progresses. I don't think this is like a big thing. This is significant, because this is that armor and MR, I'm pretty sure, is granted to both people. So this is basically in a trade. If you were end up trading with both people like throughout the fight, that could be 15 armor and MR that like you lose from like the trade, and it scales up to about the same. But people were maxing Q, then E, then W. Q for the damage and cooldown, E for the cooldown and the movement speed, and then you'd max W last. So this is a lot weaker early. 10 versus 17 is actually very, very notable. So this is a big change, actually. This is a big nerf, because this is a flat. And losing this much flat early is actually super, super impactful. So this is actually a pretty notable nerf. It hurts his laning phase a lot, so you'll have to pick Braum more for the utility that he brings, or to stop like certain things that their composition does. Like Braum is still crazy good into Twitch. He punishes his low mobility and he stops his ultimate from being useful. Braum is still super good when they have multiple short range champions, because he can just tag multiple people that have to come through him, and then you get tons of CC off. And his level 1 is also just fucking insane, because he gets his passive, which does significant damage, applies a stun. He also has a slow. He has max health damage. Like, he's got a lot going. Like, I don't think his own max health scaling damage, but he still has a lot of merit, and he's still going to have the same utility. He's still more mobile than the average supporter, so he's relatively safe, all things considered. He has damage reduction. He gets to be a tank for cheap, just like Alistar does. So this is a heavy-handed hit to his laning trading when he uses W, but I think like you'd still pick Braum if you needed like his specific utility, or you'd pick him like into certain things. But this is pretty heavy-handed. This will be notable. Here's entrance, 20 seconds longer, cooldown early, 40 seconds later. So normally Riot makes cooldowns on spells really low as the game progresses, because they want more action and they want people to constantly be able to force that action, and they want people to be able to utilize their champion. They just want people to be able to utilize their champion better as the game progresses. So 40 seconds later game is actually pretty damn significant, because a lot of what people do at the moment is they take Galio, and Galio is like in between two lanes, and then you have like let's say you have Camille in a side lane, and Camille Galio is super popular. So you're pressuring around like the Baron or something. Galio just like shows up in like mid lane and like shows, and he's clearing the wave. And then Camille can just force a fight under like a bot turret or something. Galio ults down, they kill the person for free, and then he still has teleport. Camille still has teleport, and then they can punish you even though you go up to like the top side. So then you're the one that gets forced into responding to them or trying to force something. If you try to force something, you're in a 5v4 situation. So you need to be prepared, and you need certain champions that can't be dove like that as the game progresses. And Galio has that threat to like stop you from being able to pick certain things, because his dive threat is so reliable, especially later in the game, and then especially when paired with certain things like Jarvan, like Camille, even like potentially like Alistar or stuff like that. So this is pretty notable for later in the game. The early game nerf, I don't think 20, like it's the higher on the back end, and that's interesting because Riot normally does the opposite. But I think it is because like Galio, like later in the game, like he gives so much damage reduction that you get to do plays that you can only do with Galio fairly reliably. So, which is like a unique utility, so it should be like more gated. I can agree with this. Galio has been a problem since they reworked him. He's been a problem child, perpetually too good. All right, Graves. 8 health growth is actually quite a bit. That's actually quite a bit of health growth. This means over the course of the game, he's gonna get like, what's that, 17 plus 8? I think they actually do it like level 1 too, so it's like 18 times 8. So he gets 144 more life as the game progresses. That's a lot. 144 is a lot. And then a little bit more access to his ultimate. So Graves is generally picked when he can stat check the enemy jungler, and then his ganks are bad, so the way that he is effective is when he can farm super hard, and if the enemy jungler is tracked, then the Graves can stop the enemy jungler from like being able to do what they want to, because Graves basically wins any fight that happens. If you're short range and you have to get into a fight with him, well, this health growth will help him survive the early bursts that other champions put out, and then he has more like a sustained fantasy, even though he can almost like one shot you if you like face check like a Q and eat both hits. So whenever Graves is good, he's like a scaling bruisery kind of AD carry, but he does like relatively high DPS too, and like his mid game is very potent. So Graves is normally, even if he has like a little bit lower than average like win rate, he's like a competitive staple because he's so reliable, and because you can literally just farm with him and like he can round out a comp in a certain way. So if you already have like tankiness elsewhere and you need like a little bit extra like DPS or something like that, if you need like if you want it like more of like a frontline, he can actually fill like a pseudo frontline role, because he becomes like artificially tanky with his E, and he can build like a sustain kind of route. So these definitely are. This doesn't really affect much, I don't think. But this is a pretty notable change for his durability that will probably Well, we'll see. We'll see more Graves. I don't know if he'll be back in competitive play. I don't think he can fit the meta currently, but this is a pretty big health buff. Jen is just too effective overall. Five movement speed and 5 damage at all ranks. This isn't scaling down. Like, it's not like 5, then 10, then 15, then 20. This doesn't do anything. She's gonna lose like fucking 0.5% win rate and still be like the best solo Q support. What the fuck are these? How is this a change? Oh my god. Whatever. Whatever. Okay. In her early patches, Kai'Sa was struggling to get through laning phase, so we boosted her laning phase with some buffs. As players continue to learn how to play her, we're stripping that strength away. So Kai'Sa does have this problem right now where if you're within her range, you kind of just auto-lose the trade because her Q does so much damage, and then her passive does insane damage. So she's supposed to function as like a AD carry that has the availability at the end of your backline potentially and have like assassination threat and have that burst mobility to be able to threaten somebody, right? The problem with this is the reason I don't necessarily like these changes, even though they are good changes, like she needs to be nerfed. I don't think these fix the problem. Is that she does way too much damage to frontline as well. So even though she has like the burst mobility to get into like backline and threaten backliners very suddenly, she doesn't need to a lot of the time because in a straight DPS race, she normally kills your tank and your frontline closer, much faster than you can kill hers because her missing health steroid is insane and her kit has a lot of free damage. So I don't think these change the underlying problem. I think she will still be very good, even in ways that I don't think like her champion is designed to be good, because certain things are overtuned, mostly her passive. But I mean, any nerfs are good because she's broken beyond belief. Lissandra, 10 off the mana cost of Q. This is actually pretty okay because she uses a lot of mana early to clear. And she needs to be able to clear because she wants to be able to like go somewhere and potentially like force action. And a little bit less cooldown on this early. I don't think these are very meaningful changes. This one's more important. It's kind of nice because she'll be able to put out a few more Qs in lane. Lissandra can be used as like a short range mage counterpick too. Or short range like champion counterpick, like the more assassin oriented champions, because she can build relatively tankier. She has like her stun or her own immunity that heals her. She has tons of CC that if the person tries to come through her, she has mobility for herself. Even though it's delayed, it makes her relatively safe. Between her and like the LeBlanc getting reverted to her old state, I could see like short range champions having a much harder time like in mid lane on average, just because like those two champions can be like threatening. Not many people ever really play Lissandra, but like she is gonna have like that kind of potency where she would be strong in that scenario. If this is lower mana cost, she could maybe bully some top laners. I'm not sure who exactly. Because most top laners that are played right now, especially in like competitive, are either like tanks where she can't really bully them meaningfully. She'd probably bully them a little bit early, and then they would be able to ignore her. Or it'd be like what was I saying? Or it's like Gangplank where he doesn't really have any threat of dying to her, and he might be able to poke her more effectively than she can poke him. As well as like Gnar, who's ranged, or like Swain, who's ranged, those kinds of things. And she might not punish those champions as well. So, I think she's better into like assassin-style champions, and that's like and she should be good enough that she should be picked into those kinds of champions, because she has like a really reliable engage, and then she also can like stop those champions from functioning and then not bleed in lane really reliably. So Nautilus, this is a huge amount of base mana, and this is quite a bit of AD. Actually, all three of these buffs are pretty good. Nautilus is struggling a bit. We don't find it'll help him find success in all of his historical roles, top, jungle, and support. Jenny, he has a giant anchor thrower, so the base mana doesn't matter a ton for jungle because you're going to have blue buff on your first clear. After you have your first clear, then you normally just use like 2 spells and you clear the jungle camps anyway. So this is the biggest thing this is for is probably top lane and maybe and to support. Support you do like smaller trades, but top lane you trade frequently. So I think these are like the biggest trades for like top lane, but this helps for like support too because you'll be able to fish for more opportunities to do things. So This is pretty notable. I'm not sure what Nautiluses are maxing at the moment. I know it used to be E. I'm gonna look it up real quick. Because I don't think Nautiluses max their Q. Especially not in top and jungle. They definitely don't in top and jungle. Yeah, everybody maxes EW. So Q is the last thing you max. So basically this just means that you get 4 seconds off your Q cooldown like the entire game. Basically. Because if you're playing jungle, you're going to be a little underleveled. If you're playing support, you're going to be a little underleveled. If you're playing top lane, you won't see it until like 25 minutes anyway. So until 25 minutes, or at least like 20 minutes, this is just 4 seconds off the cooldown flat. Which is pretty significant. That's a lot more opportunities that you have to fish for things like Blitz's Hook has like twice this cooldown, for example. And Nautilus has a lot of follow-up CC out of that. So he's going to be able to fish extremely frequently. If he has like a strong AD carry, Nautilus could be picked to bully weak lanes potentially because of how reliably he'll be able to fish, like in like bot lane. If you have somebody else that can follow up with damage really easily. And then the base mana is pretty notable. These changes, I mean, this is a change that helps the jungle. This doesn't really matter in the jungle. You normally only get 1 off when you're fighting somebody anyway, so these changes don't almost do anything for jungle Nautilus. I don't know how good jungle Nautilus. I don't think jungle Nautilus is good, but they are good changes for lane Nautilus, so we could see more support Nautilus. Support Nautilus is generally pretty popular in solo queue whenever he's all right. So I'd expect to see more of them. These are actually pretty big buffs. I could definitely see Nautilus immediately like jumping a little bit more back into the forefront. High wave clear is particularly worrisome in 2 cases: when it over-enables a champion to roam, and when it allows a hard-scaling champion to avoid fights. In Ryze's case, we've got both problems because he can roam and he scales well, so we're making his wave clear more expensive. So 20 more mana on E. Ryze has put a few points in E early, so as he scales it up, it's a little bit less of a difference. This might encourage, since Ryze were already putting early points in E, this might encourage you to put points in E a little bit more, because before you could leave it on sometimes you could leave it on rank 1 and get like a lot of the effectiveness of the buffs without necessarily needing to rank up your E. But now you don't lose as much when you rank it up, and it ends up at the same amount anyway. So for people that were maxing E before for the wave clear, then I mean this just reinforces that idea, because now you're getting rewarded for it more because the mana scaling is a little more I want to say like a smaller. It's not as steep. I don't know what the word is. It's a lower incline. Alright, so Sion is losing early damage on his Q. And he doesn't max Q, so he's losing damage that scales. Okay, so this is actually a decent size nerf. This is 0.6 off of it early. That's a big nerf to his wave clear actually too, because normally he just chops the wave, yells at it, and the wave like basically dies. But these are notable nerfs because he doesn't max it. So since he doesn't max it, these are pretty heavy-handed. If he's into a short-range matchup, this might encourage him to max it, because I'm pretty sure the cooldown goes down significantly while he levels it, and then the damage on it will now scale up. So maybe in the short-range matchups, you now max the Q to make sure you can get as much damage out of it as possible, and make sure you can scale that up in a meaningful amount of time. In the range matchups, there's still no reason you wouldn't take E, because you're not going to get meaningful Qs off. So Sion still has a ton of damage in his kit for like a top laner that's as durable as he is, because his E does a significant amount. He triggers Comet super free. His W does max health damage. His Q has a super high ratio in base, and his ultimate has a super high ratio in base. So Sion just tends to do a very high amount of damage for like for the amount of tankiness that he's offered. So reductions to his damage, I appreciate. He's not overly tanky, like he's not impossible to deal with in that sense. His ultimate has like counterplay, you can avoid it. Like, I think these are good changes. I wouldn't mind if they also, I don't think these fix the problem entirely. I wouldn't mind if they also lowered the damage on his ultimate slightly, because the damage on it after he's been running a tiny bit, it doesn't even take very long to ramp up. Like, it's like a screen, but then is extremely high. And a lot of times if you're a squishy and Sion connects with you in like mid game, you actually just take like 60-70% of your health just straight up from like the ultimate into like the Q, and then it's just actually kind of ridiculous. So Tahm Kench, I like this change because I always thought this didn't make any fucking sense. Like, he's supposed to be like a peel champion, but when he picks people up, he can run faster if there's like enemies. So That doesn't make any sense to me. This is super. This doesn't get used a lot for this purpose, but this in some situations in team fights, like there'll be people on like multiple angles, and so this could potentially like harm his ability to like move out of a fight in like that scenario. And then this makes him a little bit more punishable in lane. Is obviously the play here. 10% off this is actually like 40% in total, and then he maxes Q. He doesn't max E or W, so this will be lower for a significant amount of time. 15% is not a super high amount, so he's not going to have nearly like the kind of health that like he does now when you try to all in him early. So he'll be much more easy to threaten in lane. And then in team fights, like a lot of times you just get the movement speed because team fights kind of end up all over the place. So this is just a healthy change that I don't think he necessarily needed. This will probably make him pretty bad in solo queue because he's going to be more punishable in lane, which is important in solo queue, and because he's not going to have this movement speed, which, I mean, isn't super impactful, but there's a lot of situations where you get the movement speed even though you weren't trying to, like, run at somebody or something like that, so this will probably hurt him more for solo queue than this, but I think, like, these hurt him in solo queue pretty significantly. Alright, so Bey. Base stats, minus 30 health. That's quite a bit for early levels. She'll be there'll be more threat to all in her, especially with the buffs to champions like Ahri and LeBlanc. Those two champions will both have pretty good matchups into her and probably be able to threaten her extremely easily, like at 6. Like you could just take Electrocute and Ignite, and you probably have extremely high kill threat. Talia's not going to be able to trade back into that very meaningfully. And it could be very risky for her too. So, but if you have like jungle priority, then I don't think base health really matters because you don't spend a lot of your time as Talia in the lane anyway. You want to push up the lane, you want to leave and just not be involved in it. So I think this hurts her when she doesn't have jungle support, so this hurts Talia more in a solo queue sense. It doesn't hurt Talia as much in competitive play, the health. And this change you won't really feel once you're level 5. So levels 1 through 4 she'll be a little less punishing, and it'll be a little harder to find maybe a potential early roam, which are kind of hard for you to find anyway a lot of times, because normally you have to fight your mid laner a little bit more early. But 2 seconds at rank 1, 1.5 at rank 2 is a decent amount. You'll feel that the first couple levels, because normally you can get a few good Qs off, and you can kind of bully somebody to the point where they can't trade back for the next few levels. So at level 1, as Talia, you can set up your next few levels to be pretty free. Even though your trading in those levels isn't crazy, like your damage doesn't scale up because your combo is not super high damage or anything, you can bypass that really easily just by shoving in really senselessly with Q. So you're gonna be a little bit more vulnerable to like the trading that they have, and then there'll be more windows for them, especially really early, to try to trade into you. So these are probably healthy changes for competitive play. She already wasn't that great in solo queue, so like and she's not like remarkable in solo queue. So this hurts her in solo queue more than competitive play, because she'll have to play by herself more and she can be all in more reliably. But in competitive play, people don't want to take that risk a lot of the time, and you have like a jungle that can pressure around Talia so that she can play the way that she wants to. So Varus, what are we looking at here? Piercing Arrow is his most iconic spell, and it's pretty underwhelming. We're looking to change the way it builds. We're not looking to change the way he builds. We do want to create more incentives for him to care about charging Q. He's building on hit. Interesting. So they're removing some of the attack speed on his passive, which is okay. Like this isn't really meaningful, because normally this just means that after you kill like a minion in lane, you always have like a little bit of a steroid, and then you can potentially get like a quick auto on somebody, or you can get into a trade. I don't think this will meaningfully stop you from getting like an extra auto in any scenarios, so I don't think that's super important. And he attack speed caps with a few items in his on-hit build at the moment anyway, so this ends up being pretty negligible. But this means that if you get like 1 kill in bot lane, you'll be less likely to get like the 2nd kill at least, or if there's like an early fight that happens. It's kind of like invisible power that people don't feel a lot of the time, but he does actually have like he does get a meaningful steroid from like killing minions or killing like champions. So losing 5 damage on this at rank 1 is actually pretty notable, because he's not going to max it first. He's probably still going to max E. Now, especially, he might max E. But so 5 damage at rank 1 is actually is noticeable. You lose 5 damage at all ranks, so later game like 21 versus 26 isn't as big, and especially with like how you can multiply your on hit damage, like it's not as notable. But early game you'll feel that 5 a little bit. So his laning will definitely be a little bit weaker with these two. But then let's look at the active here. Varus' next Q, Piercing Arrow, deals additional damage equal to 6 to 10% of the target's missing HP on a scale with a W rank. Damage is increased by up to 50% based on charge time. So this actually just encourages his current play pattern, where he's going to get his couple of autos in, EU, try to chase you away, and then on the back end, he's going to want to shoot like a Q at you. So he's just going to activate this after the fact and get like missing health damage to potentially push the trade over even harder. 10% missing health is actually quite a bit. So this might offset, if you can land the Q, this should offset all the damage that you potentially lose from like these kinds of changes like really easily. So I think his trading potential in lane is probably even better. His burst gets even better in lane. Actually, these might just make Varus better. That might just make Varus better. His early autos will be a little bit weaker, and he might not be able to convert double kills in bot lane as often. But his burst will be higher. His burst will definitely be higher. Even with rank 1, like 6%, you charge it, it gets 9%. 9% missing health is notable. That's pretty notable. And this is going to be the second thing you're max. So mid-game, you can do 15% missing health with your Q. And you're just going to like toss that in after the fact. You doing 6%, you just tap it real quick while they're exiting. That's pretty good. That's pretty strong. I think these are buffs overall. Like, he'll lose a little bit of power in a trade right after creeps if you get into like an extended trade. I don't think this hurts him a ton because you're probably not going to miss any autos off of it because it's not that big of a nerf. You're still going to have the attack speed. It's still going to be 15% that they don't have. But and the 5 damage is notable on rank 1. A little less notable as it scales up. But this is probably a buff, because a lot of times people pick Varus because he scales decent and because he has a strong laning phase. So this buffs his kill pressure and laning phase pretty significantly. And if his kill pressure is this much stronger in laning phase, then he can get to items a little faster, or he'll be a little bit safer to get to breakpoints that like offset these small nerfs. So this is probably a buff. Vi, base armor decreased. Base armor decreased, armor growth up. Base health regen up, health regen growth up. These are small changes. This is okay. She's going. That means she'll. By the time she finishes like her first clear, she'll be 3.5 armor less than she used to be, but she'll end up later in the game with 4 more than she used to have. I assume. This is why they did this change actually. So they reduce the early armor because she gets this cooldown so much sooner, and then armor scales up shields and heals really effectively. So because they're giving her more shielding and more healing through regen, they're giving her a... they're taking away some of her armor to compensate for the fact that she's getting a significantly lower cooldown on her shield. So this basically means early game, like let's say you get like what's a common denominator here? 48. Yeah, 48. So for 3 of these, you'd get 4 of these, so you get 33% more. Of her shield. So her shield is basically 33% more effective early. You can just actually multiply the number on it by 33%, and that's like how much health it's going to save her in the jungle early. And that's pretty damn strong. The mana cost reduction on this is good. This can open up junglers to start things that aren't blue buff sometimes, or to be able to do like a greedier clear. And it can mean that they are more able to chase down kills on like the back end. Maybe they can even like regen enough mana to do that. This cooldown not scaling down as hard could potentially mean that she doesn't need to necessarily max this. It's probably still the best thing to max. I'm pretty sure it by far scales the best with damage. But it used to go down so significantly that you had to. But starting 4 seconds lower is also really significant. These are probably big changes. I feel like these probably make Vi a pretty damn good pick. Like, especially in solo queue, these changes could definitely make Vi like extremely strong in solo queue at the moment. She's going to be a lot healthier early, which is like a problem she has. She gets a little bit low in the jungle, historically. This lowers her cooldown. This increases her clear speed. And also it gives her more mobility early and makes her less reliant on Q ranks to be able to be effective. And then she also loses mana, so she can get potentially more of these in. But these are pretty early game focused buffs, and they're pretty substantial. So Vi could be like one of the premier early game junglers that you see like picked again, because she tends to dumpster, honestly, the other early game junglers that are a little more in and out. Like, think of like Kha'Zix or something, right? Like Kha'Zix, if he can get onto her first from like stealth, where she can't fight back for the first like 60% of her health she takes, then yeah, sure, he can win. But if she ever like sees him somewhere, even if he has like leap up or he can use his R or something, she can actually just R him, and he's just going to take 80% of his health from R into Q, and then if anybody else there's to support, or she can chase him down, or he wastes his leap or something, he can actually just die. And then that's the same thing with like Lee Sin and champions like that. She can chase them down super easily, and she has enough damage, especially if she gets a tiny bit ahead, to just outright kill you. So, interesting. Interesting. Probably really, really potent. Probably really strong. Xayah is currently able to coast through hard matchups and get to a strong mid and late game too easily. 2 damage and 1 health regen. This is a little bit, like, this is notable. 2 damage isn't that bad. No, it's not. This isn't going to make Xayah that much less attractive. Her strong mid and late game, I don't know if I always agree with that sentiment, because Xayah is strong into champions that are forced to come into her. But if you look at a champion like Tristana, Tristana can be effective when you're chasing somebody, when you're running away from somebody, whether you want to burst somebody, whether you're peeling, whatever it might be. But Xayah has most of her strength gated into you come into her, and then it's really easy for her to land a ton of feathers, do a ton of damage, have reliable utility through landing roots, and then have a pretty decent steroid for an AD carry. So I think her mid to late game, her strong mid to late game is not necessarily strong. Like, it's really compositionally dependent. It's not just like she's always strong mid to late game. She's not just Caitlyn and has crazy range so she can find tons of damage that other champions can't. She's not Tristana and she doesn't scale like crazy and then has tons of mobility and safety to herself so she can enable herself to play however she wants. So I don't know if I even agree with the sentiment, but these don't change her a ton. You start over? Hell nah, dude. Watch the VOD later. Oh, this is great. This is great. They are changing the AP on Archangel Staff. You still get the AP when you convert it to Seraphs. So, like 15-20 minutes if you got an early tier, or if you got an early Archangel, like probably around like 20 minutes, you could get the AP back that you get now. But 3% to 1% means that you get like 2,000 mana pretty reliably building Archangels when you're like midway through it, when you're mid-level. So 2,000, that means you're losing 40 AP when this thing, before it converts. So you're losing a potential 40 ability power, basically, because you normally have like 2,000 mana in like the mid stages of it, like 1,500 to 2,000. You're losing 30 to 40 AP, which is really significant. This could actually be a change that finally opens up, like if you want more early game power, you get a Ludens. Because this isn't going to give you nearly as much damage as it does now, and then Ludens is going to give you the damage proc. So this could actually be a change that like warms more people up to the idea of like going Ludens or something. Granted, this thing still is going to fix all your mana problems forever, and you don't need blue buff. It doesn't matter what champion you're playing. It doesn't matter how much you spam your spells. This fixes your mana forever. That's just what Archangels does. But if you want more early power, Ludens will look like a much more competitive option, especially if you're losing like 40 AP early game for building out the Archangels. This could also mean, potentially, that champions could do something like they build tier, and while they're stacking up tier, because you don't get crazy value to Archangels when you finish it, until it's a Seraphs, where you get the shield and you get the bigger AP ratio, then maybe you get tier, and then you go like dual pen or something, and while you're getting this dual pen, you're still stacking up your tier, so that you spend less time with the power trough from the ability power conversion on Archangel Staff. So you could go into Liandry's, you could go into dual pen, you could go Oblivion Orb, you could go into another utility item that you want to buy, you could just buy more flat AP at that point, and then figure out what you wanted to do after the fact. But you could build the tier early, and saving tier could be better now. Either saving the tier, or just maybe the other options are just more attractive now in general. My chair always sinks. Send help. Alright, Lethal Tempo isn't doing well in most champions. We're increasing the strength of the effect. I think Lethal Tempo has like a fundamental issue where like it gives a very clear window when you're going to be strong, and it has like a delay to it. So you can't manipulate the lethal tempo window super easily to fight the way you want to, which feels bad because other people get to play around your rune, but you don't get to play around them as much. The only champions that I know of that really take lethal tempo are like Callista and maybe like Kayle. I've seen some Kales take it. I don't know if it's good on Kayle. I actually don't know. But I think it's decent on Kayle. Definitely, this is a lot of Callistas take it. This is probably a Callista buff. Callisto will probably take it after this change, because you can either take Press the Attack and be stronger in laning phase and have more burst, or you can take Lethal Tempo and you'll scale better throughout the game, and you can chase people down easier with the attack speed early, and it offsets some of the attack speed they took out of her kit to give her attack damage not too long ago. So this is interesting too. Oh, this is a great change. This is a great change, too. Alright. I actually like these changes a lot. Alright, so Sweeping Lens is really bad early. Nobody buys a Sweeping Lens until they are level 9, basically. And then they get Oracles, because Oracles is super Sweeping Lens. But being able to run Oracles and potentially get multiple wards relatively early in the game is extremely valuable. So if you can control vision, then you have a lot more room to move around. This could be really good on roaming champions now. Like, let's say you're playing like a champion that wants to roam at 6. You're playing Talia. Well, now you can clear all 4 of the brushes in your mid lane and check like where they have wards with 1 Oracle, which is super valuable. Super valuable, actually. That is incredibly valuable. Or if you're playing like Twisted Fate and you want to roam that way. Or if you want to set up something for a gank, then you can Oracle and check multiple brushes. Like, this helps out being able to set up ganks in bot lane, because bot lane always has an abundance of wards. So since bot lane will have the same number of wards, but you'll be able to clear multiple wards in one sweeper, then this could be a way that you can get more action into bot lane. Because bot lane generally has too many wards to be able to effectively gank unless they're inting like apes. So this is a I like this change a lot, because this promotes people to take something that's not trinket early, and it makes it more competitive to contest a vision early, because normally you both get your vision and you kind of settle down. Unless somebody's playing like bad or like not around their vision properly, you kind of get your vision and you should settle down, especially in competitive play, because it's really hard to punish people when they have so much vision available. But this will give a lot of opportunities to clear wards at level 1, to clear wards to set up level 3 ganks, to clear wards to set up roams, to be able to just set up a lot more on the map. Junglers might end up taking this relatively early too, because this gives you a lot more power to clear vision in the first few levels, and that is just incredible. You don't have to like guess like what the one place their ward could be if you didn't know. You could actually just check multiple and know that the way you're going is like not seeing that you're safe. And this is really good too, because sometimes you need to, like, let's say you're later in the game and your mid laner wants to swap to Oracle Lens because Baron's coming up, or you know Baron's coming up or something like that. So you can switch now to a blue trinket, or let's say multiple people could switch to a blue trinket with whatever cooldown they currently have instead of the 2-minute one. And that's basically always going to be less of a cooldown, meaning that you'll have more availability. Like if you want to go clear vision by Baron, then it's easier for you to do so, because you can just switch to an Oracle immediately, and you won't have to wait for like an extra cooldown or anything like that. It'll probably just be like under a minute or wherever your previous cooldown was. If they have the threat of doing Baron right after you guys are doing a recall, a lot of the times like you do a dragon or you get a turret and you're like, alright, they can Baron as like a response, right? Well, you can make it a little bit easier, because you can recall, you can switch to your blue trinket, and then you can immediately blue trinket the Baron, or blue trinket their path to the Baron to see what they're going to do, to see how you guys need to respond. So these are super good changes. These make it so you might not always see like 10 yellow trinkets at the start of the game, so that's sick. This was like worthless anyway, so who cares? And I like this a lot. This is super healthy. This invokes a lot of counterplay into like playing around vision, as opposed to like right now where there's just a lot of vision around. Alright, home start buff granted by Fountain slightly later in the game. Oh, until slightly later in the game. It starts to fall off at turrets, not river. So you can come into the game later and still get the movement speed. No longer falls off instantly after crossing the river. Okay. And decays rapidly after you cross turret line. So this doesn't really matter. It just means you come into the game a tiny bit later, then you'll still be able to get out on the map. Does this Conqueror Varus skin look sick? Is this sick? Do we think this is sick? I don't know. Oh, wait, fuck. Where's patch notes? Yeah. Oh, Badlands Baron Rumble's getting like 800 fucking skin chromas. Alright, so let's recap real quick. Let's do a quick recap. So LeBlanc into short-range champions is probably going to be very oppressive, because she has her old burst combo back through QRW. She has higher AP ratios across the board, basically, and less of her damage is backloaded, because normally she would land a root on you, and then 2 seconds after when the root would finish, you would take the damage from her passive plus the root. They put a little bit more damage into the back part of her root to encourage her to stay into close range of you, which is good, because most of her damage now is going to come through Q and W. She's going to max W, then she's going to max Q. She would do E last. It's the android guy from One Punch Man, but with a bow. So LeBlanc will probably be pretty degenerate into mid-range champions because she has such reliable kill threat that you can't really do anything about, and her wave clear will get better through this W change. Well, it's not going to necessarily get better because she doesn't have necessarily bad wave clear right now, but she might, once she gets a little bit of AP, she can clear the back wave for free, and being able to clear the back wave for free is incredibly valuable. And if she needs to, then she can WR, and that does more damage than it used to, so... like in the current state anyway. So she can clear waves more reliably, she'll have more reliable single target damage, and if you're a short and mid-range champion, then she can punish you really hard. And I doubt she's going to build Gunblade like she currently does. I think she'll go back to playing her old way, where she used to just build like Morellos or Athenes, and she'd get CDR. And then even later in the game, you don't have to necessarily kill somebody. You could dash forward, just QR somebody, try to throw a chain. If it all lands, maybe they die if they're squishy. If it all lands and they're not squishy, or you don't land the chain, they still take like 60 to 80% of their health, and then they can't contest something. So she'll be played more like a mage again, even though she has assassination potential, because this gives her a fallback pattern, because most of her damage is guaranteed. She could W forward, just QR you, fish for the chain real quick, and then go back to her W. And it's basically no risk for her, think like Zoe. And then if she does land it, you'll take a crazy amount of damage and potentially just outright die. So, very, very high reach as a champion. So a lot of champions can't get to like people that are far back, or can't push past their operable range, but she has like a far reach that she can touch. Ahri, these two things got changed. This means that the only way she can heal now is through her Q. This could be notable into mid to short range champions because it'll always prioritize. That's valuable, and this could be more notable than it sounds. She's going to gain a lot of damage on R as the game progresses, and she gets a huge damage amp if she lands Charm. This encourages her to also use Charm first, rather than like fish for something else and then commit after the fact. You want to fish with Charm, and then if you get a Charm, you can basically kill somebody for free because everything you have is going to do so much more damage. And later in the game, this is going to do so much more damage than it used to with this damage amp plus the AP ratio buff. This is a huge buff. And she's going to have a lot more threat, like single target, later in the game. Aurelia, they nerfed her ultimate. I like that. I still think her E is stupid, and like it's basically impossible to dodge. This is still like impossible to dodge too, but at least you won't get punished as hard when she throws it. Because she literally throws a fucking house at you that's half the size of the lane. So, I mean, you don't really get too much option to play around it. You just kind of get a house thrown at you, and then you eat half your health if you had to like walk through it to get away from her, and then she kind of just murdered you. This hurts his wave clear pretty significantly. 1 to 10, he will have significantly less wave clear. At like 7 to 9, when he gets his Q ranked up, it'll get a little bit better because he normally just Qs the wave anyway to make sure he can push it in. But this is a big nerf to him, like 1 through 6 in particular. A big nerf to his wave clear early. You'll be able to shove in Azir a lot more easily, and that means that you'll be able to, even though he's going to scale and he's really safe to do so, you're going to be able to take your advantage and go elsewhere with it or pressure things that he can't necessarily contest as often. This is a big nerf to flat armor and MR early. This hurts his lane pretty significantly when you trade. And I don't think this matters. But I think you still pick Braum into like certain things as like a hard counter pick. Like you could still pick Braum into a short range team composition and apply your passive with autos and Qs everywhere and make it really hard for them to walk through you. And then he's going to be a little bit worse when he actually trades with you. But if you need to, like him to like stop something like I think Twitch ult, like Braum is still going to be a super good pick into Twitch. He's still going to be super potent into Twitch. Like that's not going to change because you just throw up your shield and he can't like function anymore because he's a short range champion. You can threaten that, and then he also has to shoot through your shield, which just blocks his existence. This is to hurt Galio's potential to make plays without being punished for it later in the game. More of the cooldown increase is on the back end, so punish him making plays later in the game and not being able to be punished for it. A little bit worse early, but he gets a lot of free plays later without having to answer for the repercussions of like his global positioning. So that's what that's aimed at. This is a big health buff. I don't think this really does much, but this is a big health buff. And well, I mean, I guess if he's ahead, he might get to like the rank 2 one faster for 15 seconds. So this is okay. This is the bigger buff. He's going to be actually quite a bit more durable. And then with the armor he gets, he'll still be probably pretty good into short range AD champions in the jungle. And he wants to fight people and fight them off of ganking because his ganks suck. So Graves wants to keep their jungler from doing their job, not necessarily be able to like push over the advantage completely himself. That's not what he excels at. These aren't even changes. These will lower her win percent by 2%, and then everyone will complain about Janna like normal. I don't think these changes are directed at the right thing for Kai'Sa, because I think Kai'Sa should have less frontline shredding potential because of the burst mobility she has and the fact that they want her identity to be somebody that has burst mobility that can threaten a backliner. So I think these are changes that are good just because like she should be nerfed, and her Q damage is actually unfair, insane. But I would like to see them target her passive damage because it does way too much damage to tanks for way too little investment. And because it doesn't encourage her to use her play pattern where she has to find like a good flank or come in from like a certain angle or get to somebody in the back line and be able to like try to help assassinate them. She just can out DPS your front line faster than most other AD carries can, so she just wins front to back too. Slight buffs, short range champions she already could punish, and that's what she's going to be better at with like a lower cooldown Q. She'll be able to push a little harder. Cooldown doesn't really matter, 10 seconds at rank 1 isn't huge. The Nautilus changes are pretty big. Nautilus is going to be much better as a support, and support in particular, because as support you fish for Qs and you have somebody to follow up on it really reliably. And 4 seconds off of that for basically the entire game is extremely strong. As well as almost 70 flat mana and a little bit more AD. These are great changes for like support Nautilus, and decent changes for top Nautilus because of the mana and AD. These don't help jungle Nautilus very much because the only thing that he's really going to get out of is the AD. He's not going to be like spamming his Q in the jungle. Like, it doesn't do much, and the mana doesn't really help him because he's going to have Talisman. He's going to have blue buff. He's more gated in the jungle by how fast he can clear and his ability to fight people, and these don't help those. So Nautilus much better support, a little bit better top. Not really any better in the jungle. Spell Flux, a lot of rises were maxing E, so this doesn't feel as bad as it could because later ranks of E are higher mana, just like they used to be anyway, so they're the same as it progresses. So this might encourage him to max E more because before you could leave it and you could cast other spells and you wouldn't have to worry about managing your mana. Ultimately, you still build a really mana-oriented build on Rise, so this might hurt him really early, but then after like the first couple of levels, like it's not going to ever feel meaningful anyway, because once you build like tier and shit, you never have to really worry about your mana on any champion anyway, so... Little bit of a nerf to his early laning, but not super impactful, I don't think. This could encourage Sion to max his Q into melee matchups, short range, because of the increased ratio, and I know the cooldown on it goes down fairly significantly as it ranks up. In a range, you'd still max E. They're taking some of the damage out, that's fine. I think Sion should lose damage in his kit. He can collide with you and do way too much damage way too easily. So that's fine. I like that they removed this because I thought it was always really silly that Tahm Kench ate somebody and then he could run really fast. And since team fights are really hectic, a lot of times he could run away and be a lot faster, even though it's supposed to be for running toward people. So this is just I think it's just a good change. It makes sense thematically. It makes sense like to trim some of the power that he has, like the specific power he has. Then this makes him more bullyable in lane. So Tahm Kench will get a lot worse in solo queue because he'll be more bullyable and he won't have like as much leeway later in the game. He'll probably still be picked in competitive play for the same damn reasons that he is now, but his more exploitable laning phase could be like a real problem because this doesn't get maxed till later. So Bey nerfs Taliyah. She loses health, she'll be a little bit more exploitable. This matters more for solo queue than it does for competitive play, because in competitive play a lot of times Taliyah gets pressure from her jungler, and then she doesn't have to interact with people as much, so the health doesn't matter as much. The Q cooldown will hurt her early and give you more windows to punish her early, so these two things coincide. She's going to have less health to fight back against you, and you'll have longer windows early, where she can't necessarily push in a wave super uncontestably. My chair just sunk twice. Or, to be able to harass you while you have to like try to catch your waves. So these hurt her level like 1 to 5, 1 to 4 in particular, like quite substantially. Once you get to 5, you won't feel that much of a difference, but she wasn't that great in solo queue as is. This will make her much more punishable, especially in solo queue where things are more lane oriented. So she'll probably still be picked in competitive play, maybe as more of like a counter pick rather than just like a safe pick, and it depends on like what counter picks arise. Like if Ahri and LeBlanc start cropping up, then I doubt people are going to be like early picking Taliyah, because I don't think Taliyah can like necessarily stand up to those kinds of champions very effectively. But she could be like late picked in a draft for like the priority that she can bring, and if you know that like she can be safe, but if you can protect her with your jungler, then I think she's going to be just as strong as she is now. Basically, obviously she'll objectively be a little bit worse, but like she'll do the same role. These are slight nerfs to his laning, but I think overall a buff, because on the back end of a trade he can get a lot of extra damage that he couldn't get before. I think these are overall a buff. If he can get his whole kit into you, then he has more kill threat on you in lane, and he will not really feel these as much because he can offset the nerfs to those with the power that comes from this, and then this could, if he can get an advantage via this, then it can accelerate his build path to offset these anyway. These are huge vibe buffs, and I expect her to come back in a decent way, especially in solo queue, because she's going to be a lot healthier in the jungle. She's going to be able to get around a lot easier early in the jungle, and she can really fight off a lot of the other squishy junglers because she has more CC than they do, and her CC is basically unavoidable. She can just R into Q you. And so I think these are going to bring Vi back for solo queue pretty damn readily. I don't know if these will bring her back for competitive play. It's been a while, because trying to dive as Vi when you don't have like a super amount of like artificial tankiness, or you can't, you don't have AoE CC that's meaningful, is something. I mean, it's hard. It's hard. I don't know if I agree with the sentiment that Xayah is super strong mid and late game, but these are slight nerfs to her laning. Her laning will still be bad in like the same matchups it's bad into like the longer range champions, and her later game is still really good into short range champions and unimpressive into champions that can outrange her and pressure her off of her her range window. This is a good change. This might mean people build more Ludens because you lose 30 to 40 AP early when you build the Archangels. Or it could mean that you build tier and then you sit on tier for a while to stack it up before you go into Seraphs. Lethal Tempo. This is a buff to Kalista, maybe a buff to like fucking Kayle. I don't know of any other fucking champions that really take this. Anybody got any Lethal Tempo users? It gets us to Kalista buff. This is a Kalista buff. They could literally write, this is a Kalista buff. I think she's like one of the only champions that meaningfully takes it. Even then, a lot of times they take press the attack to be stronger in laning phase. Alright, so... And then Trinkets. This is a super good change because this allows you to contest all the vision people have early. Whereas Sweeping Lens, you'd have to guess in one spot to try to get vision control. With Oracles early in the game, you can clear 3 to 4 brushes with 1 Oracles, and it means you can control so much more of the map. You can control so much more of the things that are on the map early, and you can contest things. That means junglers can look for more aggressive plays. That means roam champions can clear wards that they couldn't clear otherwise, and that they can make sure they have like safe avenues to roam. And it means bot lane can actually clear enough wards to actually be able to set up like a gank in bot lane. So I really like this, and then this is really good if you just recalled and they're like on Baron, or if you need to go over and you need to switch to something to contest vision somewhere, whether it be like Elder Dragon, Baron in a certain side of their jungle. You can switch to Oracles. You don't have to wait the 2 minutes for it. You'll actually just get Oracles, and if they're going to go do Baron or they have that threat, multiple people can just switch over to blue trinkets, and it's very low cost to do so now. So this really incentivizes you to change them when there's opportunities to do so, or when like the situation presents itself. So I could see a lot more people changing things now, and you're incentivized to. Like, there's no reason not to. So this is definitely a really healthy change because, well, I don't know if this is necessarily a healthy change because I think you should be locked into it a little bit, maybe like not the full cooldown, but like a little cooldown, but. Because otherwise, we might just see people, they drop yellow trinkets, recall, go get their oracles, and their yellow trinkets are still down while they have their oracles, and if there's ever like a risk of somebody doing a neutral objective, then you just take blue trinkets or something like that, and that could end up being kind of degenerate, but... I think that was it. Yeah, and then the sick skin. This is why they buffed him. This is